first thing we're going to do is tie our thread around our C-clamp. And make sure that you knot it a significant amount, because the last thing that we want is the thread to go flying off while we're in the middle of tying a reed. Now I did forget to mention that I use beeswax at the very start of the thread just to make the initial seal a little bit tighter. Okay, so the next step is getting our mandrel ready with our staple. And then we're going to grab our shaped cane. My measurements that I like to use are, for length is 72 to 73, and your staple should be about 47 millimeters. So we're going to place this on, and I always like to use my stomach to kind of push my mandrel against, just so I have a little more stability, and it makes it a little bit easier to hold on to. Okay, so that is about 72 and a half, so perfect. Then what we're going to do is, as you see, my grip is fairly tight right here. You don't want it to move, otherwise you just have to keep measuring it over and over again, and that gets really old. So then I will grab my thread, and you want to start about 3 thread lengths from the tip of the staple. All right, so that is about perfect. Now, before you get it too tight, I like to keep this taut so I can kind of balance everything and then hold that so I have a free hand. And that is how I measure. Now I'm trying to keep things a little bit tighter than maybe I normally would so I can get it in the camera view. So we're still at 72 and a half. It's just shy, let's see, of 47. So I might just hold on to that and use my nail to kind of shimmy up my thread to make sure, and then pull it a little taut again to make sure it's at 47. If you go over, it will likely close off your reed. If you go under it, you're just not all the way at where you want the seal to be. Okay, so I'm a little crooked, so I'm just gonna kind of think about that as I adjust this. Now, the way that I like to seal the sides is kind of use my index finger and my thumb to shift the cane as I just lightly let out a little bit of this thread. So shift it, and then I like to use my thumb to kind of tighten it. And there we're getting that overlap a little bit. I think it could be even better. I think that I had my cane a little bit off kilter. So then I'll go to the other side and I'll say, okay, that one's pretty good. And then I'll go back to the first side and just make sure that seal is nice and overlapped, or that overlap is good. Okay, so that's pretty good. And now you want to make sure that it's nice and straight. And I don't know, that kind of looks like it's a little bowed. So I might just let it out again and see if I can just adjust so it's nice and centered. And then I have to go back and make sure that my overlap is still good on both sides. So there's a lot of rechecking. You can never measure too many times. In woodworking, they say measure twice and cut once. In reed making, I don't know how many times you should measure. Okay, so I like what it looks like. This is when we start tying the rest of the reed. So next would be the crossover. I do my best to make sure that where it actually crosses is not at either of the sides where it seals. You know, it's tricky to do, and I don't know, that might be kind of an old wives' tale, but, and then you're keeping your grip really tight. If you do this slowly, your arm is going to start hurting. But as you see, then here it is super tight on my thumb as I go around, and it keeps taut the entire time to make sure that that seal is really tight. And I have gotten pretty good at this, so we can go kind of fast. But if you're new, feel free to go nice and slow because you want to keep this tightness pressure. And if you have bad thread, this is where you can kind of break your thread, and then everything goes flying and you have to start all over, which is extremely frustrating. So make sure you get good quality thread. Okay. So I am one of those that likes a pretty reed, and I go all the way down to the bottom. I stop a little short because my knots cover up the rest of it. And sometimes I do a little bit, so this is smoother, but it's not a big deal. All right, so do you see how now here my index finger is holding that thread, and I can just kind of set that down. Now what I do is make sure that you have plenty of slack because you're going to tie the knots. And the way I tie my knots is take your two fingers, make a little loop, and then go the opposite way, opposite way, and slide that over. I don't know what kind of knot that is. If you know what the name of it, maybe put that in the comments for me. So once again, two fingers, you can make a peace sign, hey, and loop them around. And then, I don't know, maybe there's a better way to do this, but I learned this technique from Andrea Banky, and I really liked it, and it stuck. So that's, I think, 3. I don't know, I do a whole bunch of knots, maybe 5 or something. And every single time, I'll do one more just to show you. So every time I make a knot, I tighten it, but then I kind of use my thumb and go back and forth just to make sure it's nice and tight. And then I will use a razor blade, and I will cut it off about there. Now this step, I did not mention this in the tools that I like to use. This is like my first knife ever, my Vitri knife. Very old. I mean, I used it a while ago. So it's super dull and, I don't know, bowed and all of that good stuff. So this is what I use to cut my ears off. And I actually do this right after I tie a reed typically. You don't have to. Some people do, some people don't. That's what I do. So I like to try to pick a grain that's gonna, go straight towards me, and everything you've ever learned about knives, I'm doing the opposite. But this is not a very sharp knife. So when you grab a grain, it should, it's like fabric. I'm a sewer too, so if you can rip fabric, it will rip straight. Same thing with cane. So if you just push it against your thumb, it'll make a nice straight line. All right, and sometimes it leaves a little dent, and that's why I would use this sandpaper. So sometimes I just go straight on and angle a little bit that way, a little bit that way, and then it just smooths it up. There's a little bit of a dent still. And then I go to the other side. Oops. All right. I don't know, this is like 100 maybe. Maybe I have used it a lot. Sometimes I do a lot of DIY projects. So before I use sandpaper, I'll cut a little corner off. And this likes to live in my little reed making kit. So there we have it. A finished blank. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments. Let me know if there are any other videos that you would like to see. I have a lot of colleagues, specifically bassoon colleagues, that are making a ton of reed making videos, so I thought it would be really fun to start making some on my own. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I hope you learned something.